Welcome to the latest installment of the Run to Daylight show. I'm your host, Todd Burrows at Bestball NFL, and I am going to have a returning champion this week, a guy who has made a tremendous name for himself in the industry in a very short time due to basically tenacity in his willingness to really just own a piece of the business that was begging for someone to step into. Greg Branos, is that the right way to pronounce it, Greg?
Nailed it.
Yeah, Greg runs the Coach Speak Index, and Greg's been on before, and we'll kind of go over again for those who might not have seen him before, some of what he does and how he does it. And then we will go into some of the specifics of what his studying has found and how it can help us in best ball drafts and our other drafts, Dynasty, as we move forward. And speaking of a multitude of formats, this podcast is brought to you by the FFPC. The FFPC has a variety of games, including my personal favorite, the $125 best ball tournament, where first place gets $300,000. They have $2 million tournaments. And the FFPC has leagues from $35 on up, Dynasty, including their very popular RotoViz Triflex, and Empire leagues, along with their standard format leagues, which is tight end premium with 2 wide receiver spots and 2 flexes. It is my favorite way to play fantasy football. If you haven't signed up in the past, you can save $25 on your first league by using the code DAYLIGHT, as in Run to Daylight. And let's get that banner up there. There we go. All right. We are now professional. Go to myffpc.com. That is myffpc.com. And Greg, thank you very much again for doing this. We've gone into your history and how you came about it, but why don't you give everyone the 2-minute version of what you do and the niche that you've carved out for yourself in the fantasy space?
Sure. I watch every head coach, offensive coordinator, general manager press conference. I will also watch some additional media interviews with, say, Rich Eisen or Kay Adams, people who tend to pull things out of these people that we may not get during press conferences, but it's still very valuable information. And so I watch all of these press conferences, all of these media things, and put all of the important, pertinent quotes into the Coach Speak Index Discord. And if there's anything that is actionable Coach Speak that we can grade, I put that into the database. Once it resolves, we grade it, and that goes towards the coach's reliability rating in that specific area.
Yeah, and there is a lot of that, understanding who you can trust and who you can't trust. So why don't you give us a little bit of how it works, right? How you rate these people.
Sure. So not every piece of Coach Speak carries this. It's not all weighted the same. There are, layup pieces of Coach Speak where coach is asked, hey, is this guy going to be ready to play on Sunday? Well, it's a very, very minor injury or whatever. Like, obviously this guy is going to play on Sunday. So we don't give that a huge amount of weight, but the coach kind of going out on a limb, like John Harbaugh last year, saying Rashad Bateman, he's going to have a great year. We're going to see him take a leap this year. Those things that are, weren't as likely, you think, maybe to happen, those get weighted a little bit differently. And it's these reliability ratings, these profiles from these coaches that let us know to what extent we can trust what they're saying. This helped us identify Jameson Williams last year as a breakout candidate because Dan Campbell so reliable with his coach speak across the board, all different categories, very reliable. So when he was saying Jameson Williams is going to be a full-time starter, he's taken a leap this year, he's looking incredible, we knew, hey, we can trust Dan Campbell. We're on board with Jameson Williams this year.
Yep. And that is really important when you're trying to, one of the hardest things in fantasy is to take in information without letting information push you to places where it shouldn't. And I call it the Wile E. Coyote effect. Wiley's so excited, so ready to get the Roadrunner that he'll run right off the cliff. And that is kind of what we see time and again in the fantasy space. And we'll get into some of these situations where Wiley's heading towards the cliff, and I'll be very curious based on your takes with the coach index and just your general, because you're a player too, right? Yeah. Like me, you're a player. People say, "Oh, you podcast." No, yeah, I'm a player first who happens to podcast. I'm not a podcaster who plays. And there's a big difference there.
Big difference.
So before we get into that a little bit more, I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about what's gone on with the Coach Speak Index. Have you come up with any new partnerships this year? Are we going to see more of you in certain places?
Well, definitely going to see more of the Coach Speak Index this year. We're doing best ball karaoke live streams on Tuesdays. We're doing live stream drafts on Wednesdays and Fridays. And gonna be doing some more media hits this year, getting requests to come on podcasts and shows and those types of things, and writing some articles as well for Fantasy Points. Did one for
that was the one that I saw. Tell us a little bit about that, because I like Scott Barrett a good bit. He seems to genuinely like to bring talented people on board over at Fantasy Points. Tell us exactly what you're doing there.
Yeah, they got a great roster there. It's just kind of a freelance deal, writing some content for them. I've been using, got permission from them to use their projected prop totals last season when I was doing props every week, saying, these are the props I like based on Coach Speak around these players. Went 27-10 during the regular season, ended up 31-15 overall, including the playoffs. And so it was just using pieces of Coach Speak and also the projected totals from Fantasy Points. And usually, it would be off quite a bit. And part of it is because Fantasy Points includes Coach Speak Index stuff into their projections, like many of the other fantasy sites do now. So yeah, it's been just like, hey, I like what they're doing, they like what I'm doing, and so we just kind of collaborate on stuff together.
Yeah, no, I genuinely find Scott his podcast with Neil Orfield every week during the season is a must listen for me.
Oh yeah.
And he took over as CEO over there, and I just have been really impressed with what he's done, and I do think that they deserve a little bit more credit for what they've done over the last couple of years. So Mad Sox thinks I'm a kiss up. I won't disagree. Index of Suspicion says Todd knows ball. Not the last 2 years, but before that, I've had a couple really good years. Hoping to get back on the schneid this year, cover up some of those weak spots.
We'll call it variance.
Yeah, well, I mean, last year for me, the big one was that I'd always been a advance rate guy, because on the FFPC, you get paid off for that. And I had some really good advance rates on Underdog, only to get shot down. So I tweaked, and I think I Wile E. Coyote'd my adjustments a little bit. So getting back to basics a little bit this year, while also still trying to build. And hey, I love all you guys jumping in with these comments. I will always put them up if you have questions. The more interactive this is, the more fun it is, the better it is. So I would be remiss, Greg, if I didn't start this with, if there was a poster boy for the My Coach Speak Index, and if there was Dan Campbell's polar opposite, Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
Like I always joke, even before you were out there, I always used to say Pete Carroll is one of my favorite coaches. I believe every word that he says, as long as it's not positive. Right? Because Pete Carroll will, like if Pete Carroll doesn't say everything's going to be okay, like the guy's leg fell off. Right? But Sean Payton not only is maddening, and I don't mean John Madden, he's got some of the most important situations this year for fantasy. And, a possible Wile E. Coyote guy is RJ Harvey, or he could be a league winner. So I would like your thoughts on Sean Payton and RJ Harvey, and then we'll move over to some of the other situations with the Broncos.
Yeah. Well, Sean Payton, notoriously unreliable on player usage and workload, 50% there. But just because a coach has a bad reliability rating in a category doesn't mean that I just want to automatically just reject everything that he says, because even at 50%, we're still talking about a coin flip there. What I'm really looking at with the RJ Harvey situation is the Broncos talking about we need an RB1 here. We need an RB1. Talking about all the things that they did not get from their backfield this year. And now they have a guy who theoretically can do those things. He can give them explosive plays. We look at Audric Estime in the most important game of the year last year. He's a healthy scratch. How can Audric Estime be the guy in this backfield? They spend pretty significant draft capital on RJ Harvey, a running back who the Jacksonville Jaguars reportedly wanted. So that's another point, I think, in RJ Harvey's favor is James Gladstone, very good at identifying great prospects in the NFL. So the fact that James Gladstone wanted RJ Harvey, that's another point in his favor, I think. He's just most likely head and shoulders the best back in this backfield. And we have seen running backs that get a decent snap share in Sean Payton's offenses put up a lot of points in fantasy.
Yeah, I've been pretty good with running back tape. And I thought, famously missed Bucky Irving last year. And RJ Harvey his tape kind of reminds me of Bucky Irving, where he shows flashes, but there's also plenty of plays where he just doesn't seem to do that much with what he has. And I know a lot of other tape guys were really mixed on RJ Harvey. My initial thought out the gate was, I just don't believe in this guy. And I found that opportunity trumps my takes, right? And he's a 5th round guy. If I end up with 8 to 10% of him, it won't kill me. But it could kill me if I go 3% and he turns into a guy who catches 75 passes and gets half the running carries, which he absolutely could behind a decent offensive line. If there's a position where your take matters less than the opportunity, it is the running back position.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation where in if you have one home league, just this redraft league, maybe RJ Harvey is not a target for you in, fifth, sixth, whatever round he's going in home leagues, but in best ball, it's a very scary proposition to fade just like blank running back for Sean Payton, right? Like a
Right.
Sean Payton running back
Right.
here. And if RJ Harvey played,
even Javonte Williams got tons of targets.
yes, he got like the fifth most targets or something. Like easy top 5 in the NFL last season, and that's, like you said, it's a lot of opportunity there. So I don't want to fade a guy whose range of outcomes is top 15 running back. Like that could be a league winning pick in the 5th round.
Yep, I agree, and I've mixed him in. And again, I mentioned some of the things that you learn. I was a big Ray Davis guy last year and Tajay Spears the year before. And I'm convinced I was right. They played great, but they didn't get the opportunity. And Bucky, I think I called him Kyrie Irving. Bucky Irving did, right? So this is a situation that screams that. And that's what I mean by Bucky Irving, even beyond how they look on tape. If a guy is in a backfield and he's the number 2 guy behind a guy like Rashad White, who proved that he wasn't very good, that should trump your take on the guy and his ability, because he doesn't have to be the best guy in the class. He just has to be the guy who gets the 200 carries and the 50 targets. And RJ Harvey certainly is that. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you also factor in the efficiency that this offense is likely to see, with Bo Nix being a quarterback who does not get sacked often, as a team last year with Bo Nix as a starter, they didn't have many 3rd and longs. That's one of the things that Sean Payton loved about Bo Nix. He doesn't take negative plays. He's getting under pressure. He either gets out of it, he throws the ball away, and then it's 2nd and 10. With that, you're going to get more opportunities on average per game with a more efficient offense. So there should be a lot of opportunities there if RJ Harvey can see 60 to 70% of those backfield snaps. That's an absolute smash.
Yeah, and we also saw last year, one of the great things is to kind of smash your own biases and being able to look beyond. Last year they ran 3 running backs, but they did it because they didn't really love any of them, right? So if he gets a guy that he loves and the guy actually plays well, you're in for it. So I want to talk about another rookie there, Pat Bryant. That wide receiver room. I was a big Troy Franklin guy last year. It didn't quite work out. I think Troy Franklin, if he can actually catch those long passes, will be a guy. But beyond Cortland Sutton, there's Vele, there is Mims, who, talk about coach speak. I mean, Sean Payton has, talked this guy up and then literally put him in jail. Your thoughts on the wide receiver room and the coach speak so far there?
There hasn't been a ton of coach speak on the wide receiver room. Obviously, we got Sean Payton saying that Pat Bryant reminds him a little bit of Michael Thomas, which okay, sure. We'll see, I guess. The important thing there is we saw so many of these guys just get cycled through the past couple of years with the Broncos, right? With Mims and Little Jordan Humphrey and Brandon Johnson and Devon Vele and Troy Franklin. We haven't really seen any of these guys stick. We did see them find a better role for Marvin Mims in the last half of of last season when they started mixing him in the backfield and getting him involved with rushing plays and these design plays that look like it's going to be a rushing play, but then they get him out on the screen and he's taking it 40, 50 yards to the house. But as far as just a legitimate actual wide receiver type thing, besides Cortland Sutton, we haven't really seen anyone do enough to be like, okay, yeah, that's the wide receiver too right there. So Pat Bryant is certainly stepping into an opportunity. He's just going to have to prove himself.
Yep, I agree. I like Pat Bryant as a late guy to mix in. Again, if you catch lightning in a bottle, if you get that Michael Thomas result. I also find that there's not a ton of late wide receivers I'm really excited about right now. So I will take a few shots on him. Let's move over to the Baltimore Ravens and the Mark Andrews situation, because Mark Andrews has really fallen in drafts. And, there's still kind of this lingering, they might trade him stuff. Both of them have said they're not trading him at this point. How reliable are the Ravens? Your thoughts on Mark Andrews and anyone else on the Ravens you think is worth bringing up?
Yes, we've gotten a lot of talk from general manager Eric DaCosta and also from head coach John Harbaugh that they're not going to trade Mark Andrews. John Harbaugh has an 85% reliability rating on transaction coach speak. I tweeted out about this several months ago when John Harbaugh said that they weren't going to trade him, saying that, 85%. I doubt that they're going to end up trading Mark Andrews. That seems to be the case now. Now, if they had gotten a really good offer, I'm sure they probably would have parted with him. But they really enjoy what Mark Andrews brings to the table for the Ravens. So we're going to see more Mark Andrews this season.
Yeah, and I think people wanted Isaiah Likely to be the guy, but I've had a hard time drafting Mark Andrews so far, but I think I'm being foolish.
He goes late. He goes late enough.
Late, right?
That,
and
you can get him with Lamar easy and stacks.
It didn't make a ton of sense why he. And then when he did do good, it was a lot of touchdowns, which we know that touchdowns can regress pretty easily. But Mark Andrews, it could have just been dinged up a little bit last year. I mean, he's a guy I'm moving on to a little bit more. I want to talk about Arizona and Trey Benson, because there's been a good bit of positive coach speak and GM speak. Trey Benson wasn't a guy that I loved, but he was okay. And, you've got a very old running back in front of him, 28 years old. But your thoughts on the Trey Benson stuff and how trustworthy are the Cardinals?
Well, when Jonathan Gannon was talking about Trey Benson back on February 25th, which is where a lot of the kind of quotes came from, he did put a qualifier in front of it. A lot of people ran away with the two ones in Arizona. Oh, Benson, it's Trey Benson time. Jonathan Gannon said, if he takes the necessary jump from year 1 to year 2, I think we have 2 starting backs. And then general manager Monty Osenfort the same day said we saw some flashes from him in the second half of last season. Took him a little bit of time early in the season. Really excited about where he can go moving forward. So in training camp last year, there was that video that went viral of Jonathan Gannon talking about the running back room. And he was saying, these are kind of all the things that Trey Benson needs to work on. And it was like this kind of Santa Claus list, just really long list of things. That's all the coach speak from them is just saying, like, if he takes this jump. So if you believe in Trey Benson as a prospect, like we didn't get to see a ton of them last season. So sometimes you still have to kind of go back to how you felt about him as a prospect. If you feel strongly about him as a prospect, then yeah, maybe. But the Cardinals are absolutely nuts about James Conner. Like they love this dude. This guy embodies the kind of offense that they want to have in Arizona.
Yeah, I think Mr. Connor is always undervalued the last couple of years. Once a running back gets to a certain age, I think, like every year, I'm going to fade Derrick Henry. I'm going to fade, and eventually you're going to be right.
Yeah.
But Connor's a guy I'm mixing in. A little bit of sad news from the NFL. It came out that Colts owner Jim Irsay has died.
No.
Yeah, in the last few minutes that was announced. He was an interesting guy, and rest in peace to him. And be interesting to see what happens there. The next situation I want to talk about is the Bears, because we've got a situation where we have a new coach. And we have a lot of good weapons that were already there, including the number 9 pick from the previous season, Roma Dunze, who is still going very early in drafts. And then they've added both Colston Loveland and Luther Burden, and I think I was super high in Colston Loveland. And I think Luther Burden has the talent. It's just a matter of his motor that didn't seem to be engaged his last year. All of them are going pretty early in drafts. Any thoughts on the Bears so far? Ben Johnson, again, we talked on the last pod about how you handle new situations. I'm interested in your thoughts here.
Yeah, it's possible we could see some early growing pains with this offense and with Caleb Williams. Ben Johnson was talking about how Caleb Williams has been a quarterback who's worked out of shotgun basically since like high school, and hasn't worked under center much. But in this offense, they want him to be working under center because that's going to help the play action game. And so they're trying to transition him to be more of an under center quarterback. And they're saying maybe, hopefully it works out. And if it doesn't, we'll just kind of have to figure things out. So that's something that I would keep an eye on, that maybe he comes out of the gate a little rocky. Don't necessarily have to panic, right? I think Ben Johnson is a very, very capable play caller and will be a really good head coach. I know certainly from what we know of him as a person in practice, he is not going to allow any players to give half efforts. Like what we saw in Chicago last year, what we've seen in the past is not likely to occur under Ben Johnson, or else those guys I don't think will be on the team long. There's the DJ Moore quitting in the middle of plays last season. We get Ben Johnson saying a month or so ago that guys are going to give their full effort here.
That was one I wanted to ask you about. I was just going to follow up on that. That whole thing is everyone is scared to draft DJ Moore because of that comment. Mm-hmm. But DJ Moore is the most talented receiver on that team.
He may be. I mean, I still think there's a chance it could end up being Roman Dunze. We have all these reports of what was happening in Chicago last year, and we know how dysfunctional of a team and of an offense that they were. Like, maybe we didn't see what Roma Dunze could do in a very competent offense. This is a situation where maybe we have to still look at him more at his like prospect profile than his actual year one, what he did on the field in just a completely defunct offense.
Yeah, that could be my prior, definitely, because I I thought Rome was okay, but I certainly didn't have him in the Neighbors or Marvin Harrison or even Brian Thomas level of skill. I had him closer to Troy Franklin coming out, so that could definitely be my bias. Um, I my default is DJ Moore, but that might not be the way it plays out.
I mean, the nice thing about a Dunze is that he's not going to be a guy who's getting in trouble there, who's in danger of being benched or traded to a different team. Like, he's going to be the one guy who we can count on to be giving 100%. His work ethic has already been famous coming into the NFL. Ben Johnson talked about it in his press conference today and said, I think we're going to see a lot of growth from him, not just in the springtime, but once we get to training camp. I mean, we should know once year 2 is over, like which way is Rome Odunze headed.
Yeah. And it's I don't think it's bad to fade Rome Odunze because I'm a big one for what do you win when you win. And I personally, with all those weapons out there and the chance that he's not the guy, I don't mind taking the chance and being underweight on him, not avoid him, but being underweight on him. It would take a lot for him to really be like a guy that killed me in that range. But I can't argue if you wanted to go the other way with him.
Yeah, he is pretty expensive, and maybe it ends up being to where he is a better NFL receiver and player than the sort of production that you see from him in fantasy on a team that has DJ Moore and Luther Burden and Colston Loveland, and then Caleb Williams has legs. That could end up being the case. And then you have Ben Johnson saying we don't necessarily want to be this like big play team. When you look at what determines the outcome of a game for an offense, it's the passing EPA of the quarterback. So what we want to do basically is give Caleb Williams these layup shots, which is why you see the Bears use the 10th overall pick on a yak tight end like Colston Loveland, and then use the, I believe, 39th overall pick on a yak wide receiver in Luther Burden. We're going to do a bunch of this short intermediate stuff with guys who can break loose for a huge score.
Yeah. And I came around on Luther Burden because I only watched his tape from this last year, and it was obvious that he was just not happy for whatever reason. And that's a pretty bad tell. But wide receivers tend to be divas. And I've learned to not ding like I dinged Jordan Addison for being a diva coming out. And it didn't matter because the talent was there. Luther Burden definitely has the talent. He is, to me, he was the most electric wide receiver coming out this year when with the ball in his hands, like you mentioned.
We may, by the way, see his ADP drop a little bit in the next week or however long. Came out today in the Ben Johnson press conference that Luther Burden is out with a soft tissue deal and remains to be seen when he will be back on the field.
Interesting. That normally, but rookies are just so expensive now.
Yeah.
I think, it's gotten to the point where it might be a little Wile E. Coyote on some of these rookies. And this isn't the kind of rookie class like we had last year with, just super top end talented guys up top. I talked about Pete Carroll and Mr. Everything's Positive, but we should talk about a first round running back. Your thoughts there?
On Ashton Genty?
Yeah.
Oh man, he's incredible. He's one of the best prospects since at least Bijan Robinson, maybe since Saquon Barkley, and he lands in an offense where they want to run the ball. Pete Carroll's saying we got to run the ball, we got to run the ball, and John Spytek is saying that we got to run the ball, we got to run the ball. We know Chip Kelly loves to run the ball, so yeah, I expect a huge workload for Ashton Jeanty from the very beginning.
Yeah, I do not disagree with that. All right, let's keep moving on to some other situations. I saw you make a post on how much the Falcons hate Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
Why don't you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is that was a new video from Zach Robinson, offensive coordinator for the Falcons, press conference today. And if you remember back a few weeks ago, we got that quote that was circulating of I expect Kyle Pitts to make a jump, right? And all the sites were doing the graphics and just putting this one quote. They left out the rest of the quote where Zach Robinson was saying, but he has a lot of things that he needs to work on. We're trying to get him to work on these things and figure these things out. They just, I guess that didn't fit into their graphic. And Zach Robinson says pretty much the same stuff again today when he's asked about, hey, what are the plans for Kyle Pitts? How, what do you see for him? How can he get on the field? What are you expecting from him? And again, Zach Robinson is saying he's got to work on the details. Well, this is a guy that's been in the NFL for 4 years now. This is his 5th year. He's still learning to play tight end in his 5th year. Maybe we should just call it a night on Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, I still take him occasionally because he does make some big plays, and the price has gotten to the point where you can get him as a number 2 tight end in 18-round drafts. And but I certainly understand if people want to just and again, I don't have a lot, but I have taken a few shares.
He's just not on the field enough. Like you look at how much they were playing him at especially at the end of last season, and yeah, there are guys in the player pool who are in that area of the draft who are running like 100% of their team's tight end routes,
Yeah, it's hard to score fantasy points from the bench.
Yeah.
Anything yet on the Jags running backs?
Well, there's the quote from head coach Liam Cohen the other day when they asked how Basil Tootin is looking, and he said, well, he fumbled his very first carry in live action. Which is not what you want to hear about a running back who one of his biggest red flags coming into the NFL was ball security. Not 9 or 10 fumbles in the last 2 seasons at Virginia Tech, off to a not great start.
Yeah, and that's too bad because I've been drafting him early. But the answer might end up being Travis Etienne.
Maybe, but
Tootin's the kind of guy that I want to take a shot on. Mm-hmm. A guy that I think does have the ability to make big plays. And, the thing about fumbles is fumbles are there until they're not, mm-hmm. But definitely not a great start. Let's finish up with 2 other situations. One is, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you 1 or 2 more, and then I'm going to ask you to freeform if I missed any that you wanted to talk about.
Sure.
Another situation is Kyren Williams. We know how much they love Kyren Williams and play Kyren Williams, but every year they draft somebody who everyone thinks is going to replace Kyren Williams. And the coach speak on Jarquez Rogers has been just insanely good. What do you make of it?
Yeah, they some very good coach speak on Jarquez Hunter for sure.
Hunter, right? Not Rogers. Sorry.
With that's how long you've been playing fantasy, as you remember Jarquez Rogers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So last year when the Rams,
I used to play fantasy when my favorite running back was a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Right? And I had this one Velociraptor, and he just anyway.
So when the Rams made the Blake Corum pick, last season, and general manager Les Snead was asked about it. He said that pick was so we don't totally wear Kyron Williams down. And so to me, it was still like this kind of loud confirmation of Kyron Williams absolutely still the guy, just needs someone to bring in to give him a breather. And when Kyron, because Blake Corum was this kind of Kyron Williams clone, they were saying basically a 2.0 Kyron Williams. And the season before that, when Kyron was out for those 4 games on injured reserve, the backfield was an absolute mess, and the Rams couldn't get anything going on offense with these guys that they had back there. So they wanted to make sure if Kyron misses any time, we have a guy who can come on and replace him. We don't see this huge drop off. Also, we can give Kyron breathers during the game, and we're not missing out on much, or again, not as big of a drop off. And then this year, when general manager Les Snead is asked about the running back who they drafted in the draft, he says something a little bit different than what he said last year. Whereas last year was we're just making sure we don't wear him down, keeping some tread on the tire. This year, Les Snead is talking about a possible running back committee where we have several players who are playing, and we have this kind of like change of pace thing. And they're talking about how explosive Jarquez Hunter is, something that Kyron Williams lacks, right? And you have the offseason coach speak or quotes from Sean McVay after the season was over, and they're doing their kind of end of season wrap up. And he's talking about how much he admired Liam Cohen's offense in Tampa Bay and how it really makes him think that he wants to do some new things, which we've seen from McVay, just constantly reinvent himself and his offense. So we shouldn't expect the offense that he had last year or 2 years ago. And we've seen Sean McVay drop these running backs as soon as they are not useful to him anymore. Kyron Williams still has not gotten this extension. So if Sean McVay comes out and says, yes, Kyron Williams, still our guy, still our workhorse, then okay, I'm willing to boost Kyron Williams in my rankings. But it does feel like a different bet that we're making this season on Kyron Williams.
I think that was really well said. Really, really well said. And that's the kind of stuff that you get when you join the Discord over at Coach Speak Index. Greg, those are the kind of things that you're getting, and that's why I am personally a member over there. The other guy that I wanted to get your thoughts on was Chase Brown.
Yeah, big believer in Chase Brown this season. They were saying before the draft how much they trust him, how much of a workload they want to give him, saying that, he is our guy, especially on first and second downs, right? That's clear RB1 stuff right there. They were talking about, we would like to bring in a second, maybe a third punch to kind of help him out, give him breathers a little bit. But I expect a really big workload for Chase Brown this year.
Nice. Very nice. All right. Bonus round. Give us one or two other situations that you feel very strongly about and why.
Okay. So this is going to go against Coach Speak from a coach right now. But we got that quote from Aaron Glenn talking about the backfield, 1, 2, 3 punch. Maybe it's a committee kind of thing. We want to utilize these guys as much as possible. Breece Hall right now is going in the 4th round. This is a guy who was elite in college. This is a guy who has been elite in the NFL when he's been healthy. And he is miles and miles better than Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. Now, there is some coach speak that does go along with this, and that is Aaron Glenn talking about how much they want to run the ball. And that was before the NFL draft. And then in the draft, we see them draft Armand Membu, right, to strengthen this offensive line. They have Justin Fields. Like, they want a devastating run game in New York. And I think Breece Hall is going to be a really, really big part of that.
I needed to hear that one. What's your second one?
Second one.
And if you don't have one, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, I tweeted this out yesterday or the day before, but I think a really good final round dart right now is De'Ami Brown for Jacksonville. Liam Cohen ran the 8th most 11 personnel last season with the Bucks. We're going to see a lot of 3 wide receiver sets in Jacksonville. Teams obviously have to worry about Brian Thomas Jr. They also need to worry about Travis Hunter. I think that De'Ami Brown is going to play a lot of those wide receiver 3 snaps. He is a perfect fit for the kind of player intangibly that the Jaguars want. When you look at what James Gladstone is saying that they want in players, and you look at what Dan Quinn said about De'Ami Brown last year, what the Jaguars are saying about him this year, just what an absolute competitor he is. I think we see a lot of De'Ami Brown, and I think he absolutely returns on a final round dart throw.
Awesome. My late guy, for what it's worth, he's not 18th round, but he's pretty close, is Jalen Coker. I think that Jalen Coker is a guy. He's a player. And I know they've added Titaroa McMillan, and they've got Theo in there. They've got Leggett there. But Jalen Coker put up, the kind of things that keep guys on the field. So he's been the guy that I've been taking late. Any thoughts?
He's my top exposure at wide receiver in Best Ball Mania at 33% right now through 21 drafts.
Nice. Very nice. It's good that you and I are on the same page on that one.
It's going so late too, man. It's beautiful.
Yep. I've been on him a lot. I don't know. I haven't done enough yet to really get my exposure to make sense yet. But let's see. I'm going to do one thing. Just give me a second. I'll throw a name or two out at you of guys that I'm pretty high on, and then I'll let you get out of here.
Sure.
So Tony Pollard is one of my guys.
Yeah, Pollard is in my top 5 exposures, 23% right now.
And another thing I'll say is that I've been very second round wide receivers. Not that I don't like Bijan, not that I don't like Barkley, not that I don't like Gibbs, not that I don't like Genti, but I really feel like wide receiver is thinning out a lot sooner this year. And, to get one of it, just because it didn't work last year with the studs doesn't mean it won't work this year. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a really nasty pocket of wide receiver that right around, say, like 130 to late 150s, 160 or so, where it's like Cedric Tillman, Josh Palmer.
I like those two.
Which I do have a lot of Tillman.
I like both of them. I think Palmer is a real. I meant to ask you about the Bills because Dalton Kincaid. Let's go back to that. Dalton Kincaid. Yeah. I wasn't on him, but as I was doing research for the podcast and looked at your Buffalo. So if you go to the Coach Speak Index, he's got each team. And so you can go back for a long time and see his Greg's take on, or just quotes from pretty much every general manager and head coach. And I thought the Dalton Kincaid comment about him playing dinged up a little bit was very interesting.
Yeah. Sean McDermott said on February 24th that Dalton Kincaid's step back last year was mostly about health, in McDermott's opinion. McDermott has talked about, and the general manager Brandon Beane has also talked about how Dalton Kincaid needs to get his play strength up. That's the big thing for him, which makes sense when you're looking at a guy who's not the greatest inline tight end. That's a way that he can stay on the field right? Is if he gets his play strength up, I think it just hurts him so much with what Khalil Shakir does and what they drafted Dalton Kincaid to do, or similar things, right? Of just winning short, intermediate, in the middle of the field. But it's tough to score fantasy points when you're not getting out on the field.
Yeah. Josh Palmer, I'm not a huge one of, well, they brought him in, they must love him. But they do talk, and going through the index, they really was a lot of good coach speak on Josh Palmer so far.
Mm-hmm.
And, call me crazy, but a guy who averaged 15 yards a catch last year going to play with Josh Allen a couple years ago, everyone was tripping over themselves to take Gabe Davis in this role. And Josh Palmer might actually be better than Gabe Davis. And he's back in that range where Gabe Davis actually paid off.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the big thing with Josh Palmer, is that he's a great fit with Josh Allen. We saw Josh Palmer thrive at times with Justin Herbert, throwing bombs downfield to him. We know Josh Allen has the arm and accuracy to do that same thing with Josh Palmer.
Yep. I think that is a real interest. And Cedric Tillman, to me, I mean, the dude just played balls out. Yeah, and when you mention it, people say, well, that was with Jameis. Well, I mean, if the guy's good, the guy's good.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, he was playing with Watson, who was, couldn't get the ball down the field. So
yeah.
a completely different thing.
Yeah, it surprised me to a great extent what he was doing last season after seeing kind of his metrics from his rookie year, and it was looking pretty bad for Cedric Tillman, a guy that just could not separate. And then last year we saw him, kind of start to put it together a little bit, and then got the concussion and never returned. Was out for, like 8 to 10 games or so after that. Never came back from that concussion, which you would think he'll be kind of in the clear once this season starts. And hey, who's to say that he can't just kind of pick up where he left off last year, and Cleveland maybe is a better offense than we're thinking that they're going to be.
Yeah, I mean, and that is really what it comes down to. A lot of smart people liked him better than Jalen Hyatt coming out, and boy, it seems to have played out. But but we'll find out, and I am going to say once again, and that if you want to play on the FFPC, use the code DAYLIGHT. Go to myffpc.com and save $25 on your first league. Go to the Coach Index on Twitter. Follow Greg. And definitely for the few bucks a month for the Discord, it is totally worth it. Not only in this season, but off season, but it is invaluable in season. Greg Branos, the Coach Speak Index, thank you so much for coming back on. And any last thoughts, comments?
No, thank you so much for the invite. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, the Coach Speak Index Discord, huge edge for just $5 a month, which is a crazy low amount of money for what you're getting in this Discord.
No doubt about it. As mentioned, I am a member, so I am not just saying that, and I'm glad that I am. So next week, it looks like my next guest, and I don't have a date locked down, but we're going to take the solver out for a spin with Establish the Runs. John Daigle will be joining me. So I'm looking forward to that. John's a great guy, Fantasy Feast. So keep a lookout for that. I'm also excited that for $7,200, you can bet on me this year.
That's more than me.
I mean, no offense to you, but I've been grinding
Yeah,
best ball for 10 years.
yeah.
I did have 2 bad years, but I've been pretty good at this. But look, Greg, I think you're a bargain. What's your salary?
7,000, which actually I don't take offense to. I'm doing like 10% of my drafts while I sing karaoke. I'm doing another like 20% with guests, and yeah.
Well, if you ever have me on to do a draft, I promise not to sing.
Okay.
Because the electronics would fuzz and it just would not be good.
All right.
Anyway, that is going to do it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Greg, and we will see you soon.